Okay, we are up and running. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Alan Christensen here with you, and welcome to the presentation on how to lower thyroid antibodies. Glad to be here with you live this evening. I see a bunch of folks coming on. If you're following on the replay afterwards, you're welcome also. This is one of our webinars in a series about key topics in thyroid recovery. Each of these topics is about one of the ones that's just the perennial questions that come up. You know, how do we reverse these big symptoms, these key issues? And the motivation was Thyroid Awareness Month. We kicked these off for that. And each of these I've also made some new solutions for, and that's under Thyroid Specific Formulations. They're sponsoring these series of talks. So welcome, good to have you guys. I'm with you on a couple of platforms. There's a group we've got like in the studio audience, so to speak. that's on Zoom, and we're showing up live on Facebook right now, and we're also on Instagram. If you're on Zoom or Facebook, you can see the slides. If you're on Instagram, the slides won't show up, but you can catch them afterward in the replay if you wish. I'll try to cover as much as I can otherwise. And with the platforms, I'll speak for probably, I'm thinking more like 40, 45 minutes. There's a few more details to cover on this one, and then we'll grab some live Q&A. For the Q&A, I'll keep an eye out on all the different platforms best I can. If you're in the Zoom, you've got the option of raising your hand under participant controls. And that's where I'll get most of the live questions from. So yeah, just hit the raise hand if a question comes up. When we get to that portion, I'll grab those in order. And this is a lot of fun because I can pull you in live and we can video talk and get some good clarification, good answers for you. Instagram stops the lives at an hour, so I will cut that off right around then, so there won't be like an abrupt stop, but the others are probably going just a little bit over to cover as many of the questions as I can. So, other housekeeping notes to mention. I think that's about it. There's always chats that go on the Zoom as well. I take a peek at that. I just saw my good buddy Josh is with us. He'll help manage some of those and give answers to questions that I might not be able to as well in real time. So good to see you this evening, Josh. And we'll kick this thing off and get it going. So thyroid antibodies. Yeah, so why would you think about those? Why would you want to lower those? Well, to feel better. We know that they can be a factor for some symptoms. We'll talk about that. To improve your health. It's also true that thyroid antibodies can raise your risk of other health issues, even independent of thyroid disease. And of course, to help the odds of your thyroid recovering, often one of the biggest central factors. So we'll talk through what the antibodies are, what they do, what they don't do, what are the drawbacks with them being too high, and then we'll get to the real focus of the discussion, which is how you go about lowering those. And I'll talk about all the things we know about diet and thyroid antibodies. I'll also talk about the relevance of nutraceuticals, how medications can affect this, and all those topics. Quick shout out, I saw something pop up on Instagram. If you are on Instagram and want to see the slides, you can hit the link that Josh just put up, and you can come on and join us in the studio audience. I see there's a little bit of space in the Zoom too. It's actually filling up pretty quick. There's a lot of folks coming on right now, but there still is room right now. So if you want to come on and join us in person, totally welcome to. All right, so let's get this party rocking here. So in terms of making it useful and understandable and actionable, I'll tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'll tell it to you, then I'll tell you what I told you. I'll give a good summary at the beginning and the end, and then talk through the details on that. I really believe that when you understand something, there's nothing to memorize. It just makes sense. It becomes intuitive. And that's the goal. I'll give you a quick once-over of what works, but then we'll talk through why it works. And once you understand things at a fundamental level, the answers will be intuitive, but not only that, you'll be better able to evaluate other possible solutions that come up. You'll have a good frame of reference and a confidence, in a detailed understanding, and you can make sense of things that you'll hear after the fact. So that's why I'd love to really help educate about these topics. So a quick overview about the antibody reduction protocol. One step is really modulating iodine, as in the Thyroid Reset diet. Another step is keeping the TSH in a therapeutic optimal range. We'll talk about why that matters and the relevance of it and other thyroid labs. And then we talk about the role of different medications. There's data that some may have a better effect on the antibodies than others. And then finally, we'll talk about nutraceuticals. And I'll talk through the ingredients that comprise the antibody support and why I chose the ones I chose, why I didn't choose ones I didn't choose, and how they all fit together and how they might be part of things for you. So that's basically it. We'll cover all those topics in good detail. So yeah, a lot of folks just coming on still. Welcome. We're just kicking off. The best place to be in the show is on Zoom. There's a link that Josh put up for those on Instagram. You can come on over to Zoom and follow us there. And there you can raise your hand if you've got a detailed question, and we'll grab a bunch of those toward the end. I'll get as many as I can, and we'll do some real detailed discussions about this. So yeah, thank you for that. Someone said your bottle letters are backward. No, I think you must be holding your phone backward. I'm just teasing. Now it'll display reverse images like that. So first off, let's give a quick overview about these antibodies and what they are, what they're not. And I want to open with some things that are, I don't know, kind of shocking, oftentimes really reframe the discussion. The basic thought is that these are parts of your immune system that kill your thyroid. And if they're there, they eat up your thyroid, they break it down, and they cause thyroid disease, mostly Hashimoto's and Graves'. Well, generally it's true, but here's some ways in which it's not. So we learn more about this all the time. We now know that there's this process called apoptosis, which just means cells get rid of old, dead cells. I think about each part of the body as almost like a collection of tiles. I'm looking at the floor. You can't see it, but there's tiles over here on the bathroom floor. And you can imagine that every so often tiles get old and then new tiles replace the old one. So that's what cells do. And distinct tissues and organs in the body are distinct because they've got their own cell type. And cell types, they all wear out and replace at various schedules. So too with thyroid cells. We call those thyrocytes, in case you'd like to know that. And thyrocytes wear out. Their average lifespan is somewhere around 2.5 months. So the old ones get taken to the thyrocyte home in the sky, and then baby ones are brought in by the thyrocyte stork and they take their place. Well, a little more depth than that. So apoptosis is coordinated by adjacent cells, the cells that are around one that's really past its prime, not doing a good job. They all have a discussion, so to speak, and they let it know it's time to go. But then how does that happen? Well, a lot of it happens through the immune system. So the immune system has a deliberate, intentional process of eating up and breaking down old cells. Guess how that happens? So some of that is by non-specific processes that are just things like macrophages or cytokines, but part of that is by specific mechanisms, meaning antibodies. So autoimmunity is actually normal. It's healthy to have autoimmune reactions, if you can believe that. That's part of how your body gets rid of old cells. So yeah, that's totally true. And there are times in which people can have very low levels of thyroid antibodies that reflect normal cell apoptosis. So who would have thought that? So yeah, they're there. Now here's the other bizarre thing that, I don't know, is kind of a fun, puzzling fact. The thyroid antibodies don't hurt your thyroid. They're not the things that are actually damaging the thyroid. Now, there's an old dumb joke about a man who was walking in a street at night, and he was obviously drunk, and a police officer saw him stumbling around looking for something on the ground. Cop says, "Hey, what are you doing?" Guy's like, "Oh, I lost my keys, trying to find my keys." And the cop said, "Well, did you lose them here?" He goes, "No, I lost them back there in that alley." He goes, "Why are you looking out here for them? It's too dark in the alley. The light's better out here." So a lot of things that we know about the body, we know about them because they're things we can see, they're things we can measure. They may not be where the keys are, but they're things we can measure and actually document well. And that's what thyroid antibodies are like. They're not what hurts your thyroid, but we can measure them. And they're often there when the thyroid is being hurt. So one analogy I've shared is that they're kind of like smoke and fire. So the fire is what's damaging the thyroid, and the smoke is the antibodies. Now, you can have you can have a damaging hot thing with no real smoke. Think about like a hot pan on a stove. There's no smoke, but yeah, you don't want to lean on that. And you can also have times where you've got massive amounts of smoke and then nothing hot, like dry ice or something making steam. So there are some times in which you have high antibodies and not much real ongoing damage. And there's also times in which there's ongoing damage and no measurable antibodies. But as a generalization, they're usually present in the context of thyroid disease. So yeah, some fun, odd orienting things, but it makes more sense out of some of the concepts we'll talk about later. So what is it that they're attacking? What's this whole thing that's going on? Well, the basic process here is that the thyroid is pumping in iodine. It's actually pumping it across a gradient. So this little plus sign, this is showing the blood vessels outside the thyroid. And this is iodide with a D being pumped inside of a thyrocyte. This is one of these thyroid cells. And then they squirt it inside the open space. So here's a ring of thyrocytes, and the space, that red space inside of them, that's a thyroid follicle. So first the iodine's pumped into the cell, and then it's pumped into the follicle. When it's pumped in the follicle, then an enzyme, a thyroid peroxidase, oxidizes iodide and makes it into iodine. Once it's oxidized to iodine, it gets stuck onto this protein called thyroglobulin. There's certain places it can stick. When it sticks there, it then gets pushed back to the cell, back to the bloodstream, and parts are broken off. And bingo, you've got active thyroid hormones. So a lot of the disease process happens when there's too much iodine on this molecule called thyroglobulin. So we'll talk a little bit more about thyroid peroxidase real quick. So this is the enzyme, and a cool mnemonic is that ASE. Whenever you see that on the end of a word, that's generally referring to an enzyme in biochemistry. And this is oxidizing iodine, and it's got to do that so it's ready to snap on and make the thyroid hormones. And where does it snap onto? Well, it snaps onto thyroglobulin. So this is the main building block, and this is a fancy form of tyrosine. Tyrosine is a really common amino acid. We get oodles of it from a lot of dietary sources. Nobody ever runs out of tyrosine. It's a non-essential amino acid, and there's really no known examples of thyroid disease that emerge from lack of tyrosine. So I will see a lot of supplements that put tyrosine in there. It's wasted space. Your body can make it, and it's never something you run out of. It's kind of like, I don't know, no one ever says, oh, I'm going to make this dish, this recipe, but I've got to run to the store and get one more cup of water. It's like, well, no, we've got water at the tap, right? So it's never something you run out of. And that's kind of what tyrosine is in this equation. So then we think about if the antibodies are there, if they're not the actual cause of the autoimmunity, what is the relevance of lowering them? Does it really help to lower them? And I hear many talk about, wanting to cure their Hashimoto's. And what they often mean is they want to have their antibodies go to negative. Well, what does that change? How does that help? Does that always help? Let's talk about some of those issues right now. So for starters, here's how the antibodies relate to disease progression. So these are rates of 9-year conversion from normal thyroid function to overt hypothyroidism. So if someone's not hypothyroid, but they've got high antibodies, what are their odds of the antibodies shutting down their thyroid? Well, they're there, and they are higher than they would be in someone that did not have measurable antibodies. But I'd like to, I don't know, if this is someone's sole focus or sole concern, I would like to put a little perspective on this. We hear about things like risks or causes, but what do they really mean in terms of numbers? What are the actual numbers involved in that? So here's some actual numbers. So if you've got someone to where their thyroid peroxidase and their antithyroglobulin are both greater than 500, over a 9-year period, they've got roughly a 31% risk of converting to thyroid disease. So about 3% per year. Now, on the other hand, if we see both of those quite low, that risk is about 11% over 9 years. So this is not to say that it's not there. And you could say, oh, the risk is 3 times as high. It is. It goes from about 1% a year to about 3% per year. So if these are up, the perspective I'd love you to take away is that you can do something about this. This is not going to shut down your thyroid by tomorrow morning. It's over time. can have cumulative harm. But on the other hand, 70% of people, 68.7% of people who have really high antibodies do not develop thyroid disease within a 9-year period. So yeah, take a deep breath, know that they are there, they are important, and you got time to do something about that. They can be addressed, they can be taken care of. The other thought is, what about symptoms and what about health effects? So with these, a big orienting concept is we want to think about the relevance of this in the context of someone with healthy thyroid function. And I'll talk more about that. In a lot of cases, we can confuse the effects of high thyroid antibodies with the effects of abnormal thyroid levels. So someone can have high antibodies and that's made their thyroid underactive and they cannot feel well. Well, do they not feel well because their thyroid is underactive or because of the antibodies? Or is there some combination? And the cool thing is there's been some work to sort that out. So in thyroidology, you hear about hypo and hyper, right? There's another term called euthyroidism, euthyroidism. And that means it's good. Thyroid levels are good and stable. So what we're going to talk about now is what antibodies do in a euthyroid population. And this is true for someone who has high antibodies but has not developed overt disease. It's also true for someone who has high antibodies and they're on medication and their levels are stabilized. They're euthyroid. So what we see is that even in those cases, they can be a factor of symptoms. Not all, but some. A couple that have shown to be relevant can include fragile hair specifically. So quite precise, not so much just hair loss or slow hair growth, but fragile hair specifically. Facial edema, so just swelling of the face. Edema of the eyes, so eye swelling under the eyes. And this is not so much Graves' eye disease where the eyes are protruding, but more so swelling underneath them. And then also hoarse voice, so developing a hoarse voice. These are some very specific things we know that antibodies can do even when thyroid levels are stable. And these are symptoms that showed up after literally hundreds of other symptoms were evaluated and found not to correlate. So yeah, these seem odd and precise, but these are the ones that antibodies really have an affinity for. Now, separate studies have looked at how antibodies affect overall quality of life and specifically fatigue symptoms. And it seems there is a relationship that way as well, that those who have euthyroidism, they've got stable thyroid levels, but they've got high antibodies, they can have different levels of symptoms, especially more fatigue and lower generally quality of life than those who do not. So there is a case to address those, even if everything else is stable. And now we'll talk a little bit about other things they can do for overall health. So one thing we know is that antibodies can affect overall fertility. This is one, I'm going to back up. Here we go. They can have an effect upon overall fertility. So this was specifically a study, again, on euthyroidism, because abnormal thyroid levels themselves can affect fertility. But we now know that even with normal, healthy thyroid levels, because your thyroid works or you're on a reasonable amount of medication, that the antibodies can still affect fertility. And specifically, this is more so first trimester retention of pregnancy. So yeah, they can be important that way. Other thyroid markers are also very important for fertility, but even when they're all dialed in, thyroid peroxidase can be a factor for that. And another thing we know along these lines is that thyroid peroxidase can be a factor for development of atherosclerosis. So barring other abnormalities of thyroid function, barring other cardiovascular risk factors, we know that thyroid antibodies can raise the risk of heart disease. And this is such a big deal. This is something that is really, really underappreciated. Our minds are good at getting us scared of some things, like things that have claws or go bump in the night. But we really suck at being afraid of some things we should be afraid of. And heart disease is probably the biggest one, in terms of things that just shorten a lot of people's lifespans, but yet we could do something about. That's this. And this is one thing that thyroid antibodies can have a dramatic negative effect upon. We've also got a horrible bias about heart disease being a man's disease. It's not. The gender differences are real, but they're not that large. And once women close the gap of menopause, the gender differences become even less relevant. So this is probably the most controllable, preventable cause of early death among women is heart disease. And thyroid antibodies can be one more driver for that. Just a little slide here showing how the risk factors can be elevated by threefold just by the thyroid antibodies. So yeah, this is a big thing. So to wrap up that last section, even with good, healthy, stable thyroid levels, thyroid antibodies can cause a worsening of symptoms, especially facial edema, eye edema, more fragile hair, poorer quality of life, and they can also cause health risks. And that includes especially risks towards impaired fertility and greater rates of cardiovascular disease. Now, next I want to talk about how TSH, how thyroid scores impact thyroid antibodies. So TSH, this is a thyroid stimulating hormone. And it does a lot of things besides that, but its main role in this context is that it stimulates the thyroid. So what does stimulates mean? Well, to be really precise, stimulates means a couple of things. It means it increases the rate of metabolic rate, increases iodine uptake, and increases the rate of new cell growth. So those are all things that the TSH does. Now, if the thyroid is irritated, if it's inflamed, if it's got an autoimmune reaction going on, if there's a hyperiodinated state with a lot of free radicals, what if you speed all that up? You can imagine you'll make it worse. So whenever we see the TSH on the higher side, like if we're talking about these varying stages of hypothyroidism, stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, that elevated TSH is forcing the thyroid to work harder to grow new cells and take in more iodine. And those are all exactly the things you do not want if there's an autoimmune process occurring within your thyroid. So what about the other side of this? If that's the case, maybe you want to shut it down? Well, no, because remember, thyroid cells get old and they go to the thyroid cell home in the sky, and then baby thyroid cells take their place. So part of your thyroid's health is how readily the baby thyroid cells are born and how healthy they are. So that depends upon having adequate TSH. So there's a problem with excessive TSH, but there's also a problem with too little TSH, with a deficit of it. And that problem is the cells never get fixed. You never get new, healthy thyroid cells. So the further you get from this continuum, the less the thyroid is going down here, the less the thyroid can fix itself. And up here, the more the thyroid is being damaged. So either side is worse. So when you're somewhere around this healthy range here, that's where you see the least complications and the least autoimmunity. Now, the interesting thing is that the healthiest range for the TSH is rather narrow. Healthy people do not have a narrow range of T3 and T4. I'm here to tell you, there's many in this popular thyroid space who argue that you need to have your T3 on the high side. Healthy people don't. Those who do happen to have high T3, they're not the healthiest people. They actually have a lot of negative health outcomes. So the thought is you want to have the scores that people do when their thyroid's working great. And that's a rather broad range of T3 and T4, but a low and narrow range of TSH. So it's not below range down here, and it's not these varying degrees of above range. So yeah, ideally it's somewhere around here. And a lot of this discussion, quite a bit of the relevance is for those on thyroid medication. One shouldn't take so much that their TSH is pushed low. There's a lot of negative consequences with that, but the most direct one here is we worsen autoimmunity because we impair the rate of cell growth. But one doesn't also want a high normal TSH, because here, all the things that hurt the thyroid, basically you've got a engine that's sputtering and you're just stomping on the gas pedal. So yeah, you worsen it from that issue there. just a quick update. A lot of folks are here. Many are just coming on. I'm with you guys on Zoom. This is like our studio audience. I'm with you all on Facebook, and I'm with you all on Instagram. Instagram, a couple of options. You're welcome to come on over to Zoom. You can join us there. You can see us in real time. I saw someone on Instagram just asked to put the photos up. We can get those up for sure. And you can come see right now. That's an option for you as well. There is still some room in Zoom. So yeah, that's totally available. So next up, we talked about what are the best TSH levels. And this is not saying everyone needs to be medicated to be brought back down here. Oh, one more point Josh just said, yeah, for getting to the slides, there's also going to be a replay link that'll pop up by Thursday. So if you did sign up for the webinar, then you can access that replay link and check all the prior ones as well. So thank you for reminding us of that, Josh. So yeah, so this is really those who are on medication. They should be managed in this range. But what if you're not on medication? Well, if you're hypothyroid, I've talked a bit about this, but there's a really good chance you can have these scores improve by dietary change. And by really good chance, it's in the 97% range. So literally 97% of people can get normal or radically improved thyroid function just by good modulation of iodine as per the Thyroid Reset diet. So a lot of folks who are struggling and are hypothyroid and saying, hey, I don't want to be stuck on medication long term, talk to your doctor, of course, but the odds are you would not have to be. This is such a big revelation for me after practicing for about 20 years before having this experience and this data all come together. I would have been more apt to say, if you're somewhere down along in here, you should go on meds for various reasons. But based upon the newer data, based upon the low iodine studies, most people can see this reverse without that. And if you are on medication, you can still see good improvements and probably need less or none. So this is not me saying anybody besides this needs to be on medication. Not at all. If you're on medicine, you might as well do it in a way that's going to work as good as possible, and it's not going to screw things up. That's what I'm saying here. So along those lines, if you're on medication, well, what types will make the biggest difference in terms of autoimmunity? So here's where the main thought comes up about natural desiccated thyroid versus synthetics. And the nomenclature is kind of goofy. I won't go into that, but natural desiccated thyroid. So this is like Armour thyroid or Nature thyroid or NP thyroid. And the synthetics in this discussion are going to be Synthroid, Cytomel, other versions of T4 only. So NDT may help with Hashimoto's, and I'll share some evidence for that in a moment. If doses are equal, the same types of patients, we can see an increase of basal metabolic rate by about 250 calories per day. So not taking more medicine, just being on different medicine, your body can burn an extra, math real quick here, a couple weeks, a pound of fat by doing nothing different. So yeah, it can make a big difference on basal metabolic rate. With NDT, you've got T3 and T2. T2 is the all-star for helping your body burn fat effectively. It's in natural thyroid. That's cool. And then once daily dosing is a good option. Now, there's an idea kind of flopping around in the natural medicine sphere that natural thyroid is something bad for those who have Hashimoto's. Well, there's only a couple of studies that have looked at that question directly, and they've all said the exact opposite. Here was a quote from a study showing that the use of animal thyroglobulin, which is a form of NDT, can create tolerance to the autoimmune thyroid disease, can reverse the whole autoimmune process. And here's from another paper showing that when Hashimoto's gives rise to goitrous growth, that they could improve when treated with desiccated thyroid. So we've got data like this that's been published. There's no published data saying the opposite. I've dug around for it. Then here's some case reports. So this is anonymous. This was a patient of mine back in 2012. She had quite high thyroid antibodies. We can see microsomal TPO. Microsomal was kind of an older name for that. TPO is thyroid peroxidase. And then she had thyroglobulin antibodies. And they were both up by a fair amount. And this was in May. And these were follow-up labs, which was December of that same year. They're both non-detectable. The only change that took place was a change to natural desiccated thyroid. And I've seen this many times. So natural thyroid can help to lower antibodies. Real quick point of trivia for you guys. So thyroglobulin antibodies, there's another test called thyroglobulin. It's not the same thing. There's thyroglobulin by itself, and there's thyroglobulin antibodies or anti-thyroglobulin. Those are different tests. They mean different things. So if someone's toying with the idea of changing, of swapping to different kind of medication, how do these things compare for dosages? Well, here's a chart that shows approximate comparisons. So each row is about the same potency as everything else in that same row. The big gaps, the white spots, those are potencies that are not made for that medication. So this first column, this is now just saying potency in terms of grains for natural thyroid. And this is here, this next column is talking about WP thyroid, nature thyroid. Then we've got IRFA for our friends in Canada, and Armour and NP thyroid. And over here, we've got T4 only medications, and then also T3 only medications. And the rows are their approximate equivalent dosages. And I'll talk a bit more about that. So what that means is that if someone were on a 100 microgram dose of Synthroid, and they were hearing information like this, they thought natural could be better for them. With their doctor's guidance and input, the closest comparative dose would be a 60 milligram dose for Armour or a 65 milligram dose for nature thyroid. So that's what this whole chart means. Now, when someone does change, these things to some extent are apples and oranges. I've got to say that. I did the math. I wrote a lot of these charts that are out circulating in various places. I wrote them a long time ago. And I'm the first to say they're not perfect. So they're starting places, but it's great for someone when they change to plan to test several times and expect to make a lot of adjustments, like 2 or 3, not uncommonly. So it's better, if anything, to err on the low side, because if you get too much, that's dangerous. If you get too little, it's not good, but it's less dangerous. So if anything, it's smart to err on a lower equivalent dose. Have your doctor check several times over the course of the next couple of months and do fine tuning, get it just right. You know, I'm the world's least knowledgeable about golf, but an analogy is you want to get the ball to land somewhere in the green, but you don't want to go over the green and land in the sand trap. So it's kind of like that. You want to fall short and then fine tune and just get it dialed in for you. Now we'll talk a bit about the relevance of iodine and thyroid antibodies. So quite simply, I'm going to jump back a little bit. So this protein thyroglobulin, the one that's the backbone for all the thyroid hormones, it's got varying spots for iodine to attach to. These are called tyrosol residues, to use a fancy term. And there's about 13 tyrosol residues per thyroglobulin molecule. But iodine can crowd in wherever. So when there's a lot of iodine floating around, after those 13 spots are filled, it keeps getting stuck where it doesn't belong. This is kind of like, I don't know, the clowns in the Volkswagen Beetle. There's no more seats, but they keep on cramming themselves in, right? So that's what it does. And the extra stuff that's not where it belongs, it hurts things. It creates free radicals. It damages cells. It confuses the immune system. It makes the immune system think that there's a fire, there's bad things. So the immune system starts to attack this poor thyroglobulin molecule. It thinks that it's to blame. And because thyroid peroxidase is the one helping to turn on all this iodine, it gets blamed too. So these healthy molecules that belong in your thyroid, they get treated as foreign invaders solely because of excess iodine. The other 2 big drivers of that are age and female gender. Those are things we can't change. But this is the one thing we know that's an irrefutable driver of thyroid disease that we can change and that it helps to change. So that's this strong connection. And I'll briefly, coming back to where I was, just briefly share the results of one study. This was people with Hashimoto's. The only thing they did is put them on a low iodine diet for 3 months. And over the course of those 3 months, 78.3% got totally normal thyroid function back again. So average TSH scores went from 14.1 down to 3.0. So not perfect, but dang close to it. And 78.3%, that's a good number by itself. But it's a little misleadingly bad because this fails to take into account compliance. So when you dig deeper in the numbers of the study, you realize that a lot of folks weren't following the diet. And that's just normal. That just happens in the real world. So when you put them over here and you say, okay, who followed the diet? How did they do compared to just themselves? And what we see then is that 97% of them saw radical improvements to thyroid function. Some of them didn't yet get normal because their starting TSH scores were in the 50 to 200 range. They were off by that much. So they were heading that way. But if we look at those who were compliant and those who improved, and we include those who had a big shift and those who normalized, that number is now 97%. So this makes a huge difference. And there's really not, it's not worth putting any effort or thought into lowering your antibodies without thinking about iodine. It's just a total waste of time. You shouldn't bother doing anything whatsoever if you're not lowering iodine, because this is the biggest controllable driver of them. So yeah. And to do so, to lower it, that's really just going on the green light foods. And of course, being aware of some of the hidden sources. I hear a lot of people ask about supplements that have iodine. How much is too much? Well, any is too much because they always have more than you would think. And because the target is rather low and rather narrow. So you just don't want pills that have iodine, and you don't want personal care products that have iodine. You don't want salt that has iodine, and then focus on foods that are not going to be excessively high in it. These green light foods, these are not iodine free. You still get some, and that's a little bit is fine. Once your thyroid stabilized, gotten healthy, you can start throwing in some of these yellow light foods, some of these borderline ones, and you can do great with that. That's the cool thing. This is not forever. And the other cool thing is this can work with any other dietary plan you're on. You can go vegan, paleo, gluten-free, AIP. You can do all of that while you're regulating iodine. And this is the one thing really well evidenced. So now we'll talk about micronutrients and supplements. This is easy stuff. These are things that are passive. They can be done well. They can be safe. And there's no big drawbacks to those. Now, there's a lot of things that are purported to help thyroid function in some vague ways. And I want to do only what's going to work and nothing else. And I want to do what we know is going to work. So for starters, anything I would consider, it's got to be safe. There can't be any even plausible negative issues about it. Well, it's got to be iodine free because that's where we have to start. And I want to base things on quality research. That means human studies, not animal studies. I don't care if it helped a rat. I don't care if it helps cells in a test tube. I want to know that's going to help you. Also on clinical trials, not just studies saying that this number moved a little bit for a week, but studies showing that people actually got better in meaningful ways. And I want studies that are controlled. I want to see that it helped this group, and this group that did nothing had a different result. And I also want to make sure it's not just a placebo. Placebos are real and they're powerful, but that's not good enough. I don't want you to be putting your efforts into something that's just wishful thinking. So here was kind of the process that I went through on this. I first pulled together all the decent studies showing that nutraceuticals could be useful. Got about 89 studies to work from, 89 different possible ingredients, I should say. Then saying, what are the things that are unquestionably safe? Well, not all of them. There are certainly nutraceuticals that have had contaminants, that have had signs of liver toxicity, that have had other problems. So that weeded some out. And even if they sounded promising, I didn't want to take that chance. I don't want you to do anything that could possibly have any negative risks. So then, are they iodine free? Well, some were not. Some were animal products, some were sources that couldn't guarantee low levels of iodine. So now we're down to fewer ingredients. Then do we have quality research? Have we got human studies to back things on? That brought it down further. And also wanted to do it so it wasn't overlapping and redundant with the multivitamin, where it wasn't doing too much of something and be getting already. And that brought us down to our active list. So the first one I want to talk about is a compound that's called inositol. And this is actually a sugar, believe it or not. It's a carbohydrate-like compound. And we know that it's a big part of regulating the TSH response. So the body can make some. We do get some from our diets. But if we add it in, we get healthy response to TSH. We talked about how that's important for thyroid repair and a healthy rate of thyroid function, not too fast and not too slow. Regulates the immune system, benefits inflammation. And here's an example of a clinical trial that was done. In this one, it showed that the usage of it correlated with dramatic reductions in thyroid antibodies. This was true both for thyroglobulin and thyroid peroxidase. And this is for humans with autoimmune thyroid disease. This safely made a big difference. Next one I'll mention is going to be Nigella. This is black cumin seed. There have been a couple of really big studies showing this to have multiple good effects upon thyroid issues. And that's why I've used it in more than one formulation. So with it, we've seen that it can drastically lower thyroid antibodies and drastically improve the output of active thyroid hormones. So we've got a lot of lines going down, we've got a line going up. So the going up means the thyroid is functioning better. It's producing more hormone. The lines going down include the thyroid autoimmune response. They also include the TSH. So those with the high TSH saw Nigella help it come down. Now, this doesn't mean that if you're hyperthyroid, it'll push your TSH too low. It means that if it's too high, it'll help normalize it. But it's doing so not by speeding the thyroid, by reducing the inflammation on it. Another line is showing that VEGF went down, and that's cool. That means the risk for developing thyroid cancer is decreasing. So a lot of really good health outcomes from this one compound. And then one other item that I included was some added selenium. So it's good to have some. I do include a basal amount in the thyroid daily supplement, but there's data saying that for specific purposes, bonus amounts can have additive effects upon helping deiodinase enzymes and helping to regulate glutathione. And we've got studies proving that both antithyroid peroxidase and antithyroglobulin can come down by 30% or greater with the added inclusion of that. So these are all things well documented from high quality human studies. And this is safe, this is effective. These are things that can readily reduce them. Oftentimes, initial changes can show up within a 3-month period. I do suggest thinking about a 6 to 12 month time frame because antibodies can bounce up and down. Even if you're doing something that does help with them, you might see them go up and down as they're trending downward. So they are markers that do have a lot of fluctuation. So think about a reasonable time frame of that. In terms of combinations, that's meant to go with the Daily Reset bundle for other micronutrients. And then monitoring, a big thought there is watching your thyroid function. This is especially important for those on medication. If you are on thyroid medication, your antibodies come down, your thyroid works better, you may outgrow that dose of medication. So the amount that works well for you may soon become an amount that is more than you need. And that can push you into hyperthyroidism. So yeah, I've heard people ask about this. If your TSH is already on the lower side of the range, then no, you won't push it downward. So this is not something that forces your TSH to lower. It helps your TSH regulate. So yes, if you're on the low end of the range, you'll either stay there or come up slightly. If you're above range or high, many see that work downward. And that's what's really exciting about working with natural compounds. They work by helping the body work better. They're not forcing it to go left or right. They're helping it be stronger and become more resilient. So yeah, the active ingredients that I chose were these ones that have high quality, placebo-controlled human studies on that. And usage is quite simple. You're really just doing this once daily with food. No big drawbacks about that and no big negatives. So generally, though, other considerations, think about if your medication might change. Pregnancy, lactation. These are all compounds that are in food. They're all safe things, but they're not studied on pregnant women. So we do not encourage them in those populations. There may be a possibility of a heightened effect of both anticoagulant medications and beta blockers. So do be aware of that if you're on other medications for those purposes. So yeah, this is meant to go with the bundle. The bundle is the Thyroid Daily, the Thyroid Specific Multi, and it's also going to be the Omega Pure, which is the low iodine omega-3 fats, and then the calcium magnesium. So this is the comprehensive blend of micronutrients for supporting general health. And overall, we think about the context of this, of being used with the reset phase of the thyroid reset diet, natural desiccated thyroid at healthy dosages if you're already on medication. And a little more detail, what that looks like is thinking of the TSH being in this narrow or optimal range, and then 2 once daily for antibody support. So quite simple. That's the basic idea behind that. And with that, we can quite consistently see these antibodies come down. And think through if they are relevant to you, if they are important, if they're affecting your health. And these are the main strategies for reducing those. So that was the talk. Got some time for some questions. So yeah, with you guys on a couple of platforms, I'm going to stop the screen share here. And my friends on Instagram, I'm seeing you here, and I'll respond to a couple of questions that I saw there. I will stop on Instagram in a few more minutes because I'll get cut off otherwise. So a couple that I saw on Instagram that I think many ask about, one was LDN. What about low-dose naltrexone? Sure. So not a supplement, right? It's a medication. It's actually a narcotic medication. It's a narcotic agonist. So there is a risk of seizures as a side effect to naltrexone. And there have been some case reports of people developing seizures from low-dose naltrexone. Having said that, I wouldn't say never just because of that. If there was dramatic benefit that was much more common, still consider it. The first study we had done on low-dose naltrexone was actually done 2 years ago. It was done in Norway. They took a group of 600 people, put them in 2 groups, and one half went on low-dose naltrexone, one half did not. It's thought that those who take it would have their thyroid function get better and they would need less medication. It didn't happen. Those on low-dose naltrexone needed more medication increases in the group that didn't take it. So yeah, the only one human study showed that it didn't work. It actually had the opposite effect, if anything. So yeah, I've known about it for years. I've heard many talk about reasons why it would work, but so far that's the first study actually seeing if it worked or not. And you always have to ask yourself, is something being talked about because there's a reason why it would work or because it was actually shown to work? And that's a really different question. So, okay, enough there. I want to start getting into some questions we've got here in real time. Got a bunch of folks with us here live in the studio audience, so to speak, a lot of hands up. And I just want to share with you guys a couple of my thoughts from the very beginning. With the questions, I'd love to get them all, but I'd also love to get some of them really good. And sometimes when I've done these before, I've ran around really fast and given quick answers to many questions, but I don't think I've served people as well. So I'll probably get fewer questions, but go in more detail. And my thought process is, if I can't get to yours, maybe I'll end up talking about your question anyway. Maybe I'll cover it in the detail of some of the others. You're also welcome to post things in chat. I do look at the chats. I'll try to get some chat comments in real time, but I will also watch the chats afterwards for ideas on making future content. Someone just said, I don't know how to raise my hand. Yes, if you hit the participants button, you've got the option in there of raising hands. So that's the spot under your Zoom control where you can raise your hand. So when I click on you, I'll hit ask to unmute. You'll see that pop up on your screen that you can unmute. You'll unmute yourself, you'll start talking, and I'll see you. If you can join live on video, love to see you in person. That's a fun thing. If you can't, I understand. I won't have my feelings too badly hurt. But if you can show up and chat in person, that's a lot of fun. And if I hit unmute and maybe your mic is not set up, maybe the tech gods are not working with you, I'll give it a minute or so and I'll go on to the next person. So please understand, you're welcome to raise your hand and we'll try again. Another thought is keep your question specific. It should end in a question mark when you ask it. Sometimes I've been, nervous or unsure about things, and my questions end up being long rambling statements. That doesn't help anybody, so I don't want to do that. So yeah, make your question a question. It should end with a question mark, and I'll give it a good, specific, thorough answer and probably have some follow-up questions for you as well. All right, with that, let's dive on in and get some live questions. We've got another 10 more minutes here to hang out with Instagram. Then I'll stop that one and we'll do a little more on Zoom. So Maureen, you are up first. Now, if there's more than one person with a first name, just watch that ask to unmute. It'll come up. So Maureen, I'm going to ask to unmute and go for it. You can start speaking.
All right, great.
Hey, Maureen.
Hi. I have a question that I've been trying to get the answer to for quite some time. What other than thyroid hormones can cause the TSH to be extremely low?
Yep. So yours or someone's is low and they're not on medication?
No, I am taking medication, but my TSH is like lower than 0.005. And I have tried drastically lowering my thyroid hormone, and it had no effect.
Sure. So if you're willing to share what dosage of medication you're on, what type of medication you're on?
Okay. I'm taking Armour 75 milligrams.
Okay.
And my T4 is 4.9 and my T3 is 2.6.
Sure. So here's a funny thought. People often expect that if they lower the dose, right away the T4 and T3 will drop off. They don't. So what happens if you're taking more than you need? You and the doctor could lower the dose many times and the TSH might not budge at all. Eventually it will. So what happens is your scores are a function of what your body is making plus that medication. And between the two of those, it's more than your body needs. It's really quite that simple.
Well, here's what happened. I got it down to half. And it almost killed me. I could not function. I could not move. I was totally fatigued. And I said I would never do that again.
Sure.
So I wasn't getting too much. I'm terribly fatigued.
Well,
I'm only now kind of down back to normal feeling.
Sure. So when you were at that half of the dose, what were your scores like?
Well, I don't recall what my TSH, my T3 and T4 were, but my TSH didn't. It might have gone up a tiny bit, but not hardly anything.
So yeah, I'll close this out with a thought. So when you're getting too much, you can feel badly and you can feel tired. And this is where a lot of doctors get confused. They can say, well, someone only feels better if I give them more. They feel worse when they lower the dose. That doesn't always mean you're healthier at a higher dose. Your body can be thyroid resistant. You can have fatigue from other factors. People can have fatigue from a variety of reasons. And if they're on a lot of medication, they might feel a little bit better, even if they really ignored or missed the main cause of that. So either the dose was changed in a way that wasn't a good fit for you, maybe too quickly, or there's some other reason that you're not feeling well. But that happens a lot. And those cases are significant. So the important point is to really work with a doctor that can help understand how to get you to a level that's safe for you where you feel your best, and also see if there's any other factors. I've talked about this as being the comorbidities of thyroid disease, but there's 15 or more conditions, each one of which affects 5% or more of people with thyroid disease. Some actually affect 84%. So most everyone with thyroid disease has something else also. And doctors can often focus too much on the medication and not think about the other conditions. So yeah, really, really good question. Let's get one from Meg here. Meg, you are next up, and let's hear what you've got.
Hi, Dr. C. Thank you so much.
Hey, Meg.
My question is somewhat similar to the last Maureen, I guess her name was. I was hypothyroid, and I started your Thyroid Reset diet back in September. Very happy to do so. And my TSH had been ranging between 5 and 7 prior to that. And now it's untraceable. The last 2 times that I had my blood work done, my T3 free was at 3.7 and my T4 is at 1.3. So I know that's kind of on the high end, but I don't know if I should be concerned about my TSH being so low. And if so, what I should do about it.
For sure. So yeah, and moving forward, I'll talk a lot about thyroid antibodies as much as possible. Meg, are you on medication?
No, I am not on any medication. Okay. And yeah, my antibodies were like 187 prior to the diet, and now they're at 250. So they're pretty close, but they didn't go down, but they didn't go up too much. So
what you're describing is undiagnosed hyperthyroidism. If your TSH, you're saying it's below range?
Yes, but it never has been. It's always been high. I've had Hashimoto's for 10 or 15 years, and it came down from the diet. So I was super happy, but now it's like too low. So I don't know why it's not, why it's that low.
This is actually not an uncommon thing, but a really high percent of those with Hashimoto's can have Graves' antibodies. And there are times to where they can have one disease manifest over the other. Sometimes that can be as thyroid function improves, it can overshoot, or Graves can be unmasked and manifest. But that's a matter of working with a doctor that can sort out what are the secondary factors affecting this. But yeah, that's important to explain still and important to address.
So if I wait a little while and retest, it potentially could balance out, or?
I couldn't say that for sure. It's good to get an answer.
Okay.
Always good to explain hyperthyroidism.
All right. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Okay. There we go. All right. Karen, you are up next. Let's hear what we got from Karen. I'm going to get caught up here on, there we go, lowering Meg's hand. All right, Karen, go for it.
Hi.
Hey, Karen.
I've been on your Daily Reset pack and the Daily Shake for a couple of years now, many years now. I had about 85% of my thyroid removed actually 50 years ago.
Okay.
And my numbers are actually pretty good right now, but I'm confused about your new Thyroid Specific Formulations and the old stuff that I'm on.
Sure.
Do I switch? Do I stay where I am?
Okay. Let me restate this one. So on Instagram, the audio is not going to be coming through. So Karen's with me. I'm hearing her here. She was saying that she's been on the various vitamins of mine in the shake for many years. Her scores have gotten better. And now the question was really just what to do about the new supplements. So she'd be switching over. So the main thought is really about the Daily Reset pack versus the Daily Reset bundle. And this is a good question, Karen. This is one that I've asked myself and thought back and forth about. So the pack is comprehensive micronutrient support. It's in packets and it's a twice daily regime. It's higher dose B vitamins. There are those that do better with that. There's been newer emerging data arguing that unless someone knows they need a higher dose of B vitamins, lower doses are probably a better fit. So overall, I'd say by default, I would switch. I would do the new one. If you've been a fan of the pack, if it's worked well and you know that's a good fit in various ways, you're welcome to stay with it. We're not going to pull the rug out from underneath anyone. We're going to keep that available. But if someone's saying, hey, look, I'll do either, I would do the new Daily Reset bundle. The reason for that is there's fewer pills. It's just less pills to take. It's once daily dosing. The Daily Reset pack, Karen, tell me the truth. Do you take it twice a day or you take it usually once a day?
No, twice a day, once in the morning and once at night.
Well, you're better than most. most miss their second dose, and I didn't want to fight people anymore, and I wanted people to get their nutrients. So I was able to compress that further, make it into a once daily regime. So it's once daily, it's fewer pills, ends up being more cost effective, and it's a little more targeted on the amounts of the B vitamins. So those are the big differences that way.
And I've been on a compounded, porcine thyroid. And I just spoke to my doctor yesterday and we're trying to switch to NP. Do you recommend that or is the compounded one better?
Well, good question. So Karen said she's on a compounded natural desiccated thyroid. Her doctor's talking about switching her to NP. So in terms of natural desiccated thyroid, we talked about it earlier, products in the market now, Karen just mentioned two of the three. We've got compounded, we've got NP, which also goes by generic sometimes, and we've got Armour brand. Past brands like WP Thyroid, Nature Thyroid, honestly not available. And no,
I've taken those too.
Okay. Yep. I don't see them coming back in the near term or past that. I honestly don't. So compounded natural thyroid. Well, there's a pharmacy I know of, and I'm sure others can do this as well, but there are those that can use the pre-standardized raw materials that are made into WP Thyroid and Nature Thyroid. So they can take the raw natural desiccated thyroid that's already been standardized and then compound that. There is unstandardized desiccated thyroid powder, which is used by default. So one question of the compounders is if they're using a pre-standardized powder or not. The next question is, are they standardizing themselves and measuring it for post-production hormone content? There's a local pharmacy here called Foothills Pharmacy in Mesa, Arizona. They don't pay me anything. It's not my brother that runs it. But they do buy the powder that was the powder made to make WP thyroid, and they do a really good job measuring the hormones before and after they produce it. So it's probably even better standardized than synthetics or other brands because they can adjust it for any ways in which it might not be perfect going into it. So I'm a big fan of that. If another compounder did the exact same thing, that could be a good thing. I don't know of others that do. I'm not saying none do by any means, but in most cases, they are using a non-standardized compounded powder, and they're not assaying the hormone content. And the drawback about that is the amount of active hormone could fluctuate by a lot. Even if they give you the right amount of powder, you might not get a consistent amount of hormone. So if my choice was between just compounded, not knowing any further, and NP, I'd take NP. If I had the option of having it done by those folks, I would do that one. The other perk about theirs is that the only inactive ingredient is baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. So it's quite clean and very low in binders or fillers. So it's easy to absorb. So yeah, if I could choose theirs, I would choose it. If I didn't know who was compounding it and how they were making it, I would do NP thyroid over that. So
great.
And NP or Armour, the two are not big differences between the two. In most cases, insurance companies would prefer not to pay for Armour. It's often less cost effective, but it has had fewer recalls than NP over the last couple of years. So there is that. It's been more consistently available. So yeah, those are the options right now for NDT.
All right. Thank you very much. But I'll stay on the shake, right?
Yep. No changes to the shake.
Okay.
We worked so hard to get that to taste right, and to get all the ingredients perfected. So no changes there.
I've taken it for years.
Appreciate that. Take care of yourself, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's get several more here. And where are we at? Okay. So we're about to get the hook is going to come out and pull me off stage on Instagram any moment. So before that happens, have a great night, you guys. Josh has been putting up the links for where you can come and join the studio audience here at Zoom. You can come on over, hang out, and join the party, but I'll catch you guys on the flip side really soon. So I'll say good night to you all. All right. So there's that. And now it's just us here in the party room. And let's hear what we've got from, I'm going to lower Karen's hand. She just spoke. Let's hear what we have from Marion. So Marion, I'm going to hit ask to unmute and go for it. What have you got for us?
Hi there. Well,
hey, Marion.
I am absolutely not prepared with the numbers.
It's okay.
I don't know what
we'll figure it out.
Okay. So I remember that I have some smaller nodules on my thyroid that nobody they got discovered looking for something else. And I'm having a lot of hair loss and insomnia.
I wouldn't know it from looking at you. You had a nice full head there, but
a lot less than it has been. So
that's important then.
Yeah. And I find hair everywhere.
Okay.
So and it's upsetting me. So I'm wondering if that's and there's some insomnia. So I'm wondering if that's thyroid related or not.
Well, if you've been told your thyroid levels are abnormal, it sure could be. And a couple of thoughts about that. So if at the earliest stages of autoimmune disease, we can see the antibodies get high before you start getting goofy TSH or T3 or T4 levels. That's often the first thing to change. And for some people, we can see but the hair weakening, the hair breaking more easily. That can be a sign from the whole autoimmune process.
So what do you think should be done about something like that?
If you've not screened for that, do screen for your thyroid function. If your antibodies were negative, your thyroid scores were perfectly optimal, this stuff wouldn't help your hair. It wouldn't make a lick of difference. But if your antibodies were high, this could be part of the regime that could be useful. Hair loss, I always think about iron too. Always great to take a peek at your iron stores, see how they're doing. Ask your doctor about that. That's often a big one. Iron, protein, thyroid function. Those are the top 3 factors for hair health among women. So yeah, big things to think about. If you're not on just good general micronutrient support, the daily bundle, the Thyroid Daily, that's a safe thing across the board, can be useful, but I'd want to know why that's happening for you. So yeah, please work with a doctor to understand that. Which state do you live in?
Texas.
Okay.
In Austin, Texas.
Yeah, you got some good doctors in Austin there. And yeah, and just so everyone knows too, I do thyroid second opinions. I'll pop the link up, or maybe if Josh is there's a link you could put up for thyroid opinions. these are really fun. These are where we talk one-on-one. We talk through your labs. I suggest some labs beforehand. We get thorough and we get specific, and it's all about you and what can help you. I give things that your doctors can use to guide them to help you more effectively. I don't always offer these. I do every so often, but I do have some openings in March and I think a couple in April right now. Then I'm stopping for the summer, and I'll probably pick them up again in the fall, but they're kind of hit or miss based upon the schedule. But they are available, a couple in these coming months. So that's at thyroidopinion.com, and we could talk just one-on-one. You can just see that on that site, what that means, what that entails, how to schedule it, and just you can check that out as an option too. Okay. But yeah, first thing is knowing why this is happening for you and whether or not the thyroid's relevant. And if not, what is relevant? And
there are doctors in Austin that you do recommend?
Sean Tassone is a good one off the top of my mind that I know personally. How do you spell his last name? Tassone. His main focus is he's a GYN, but he does do some management of thyroid disease as well. And he has consulted with me on cases. So he does do good work that way.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Let's get a couple more in here still. So let's see. Let me stay caught up. So that was Marion. Next up I see is iPad 10. I'm guessing that's not on your birth certificate, but let's hear what you've got for us.
Hi, Dr. C. Thanks so much for taking my call. My name's Suji. I don't know why it says iPad 10. My question is, I'm a really healthy 52-year-old, and I was started getting symptoms of Graves' disease about 2 weeks after my second vaccine last year.
Okay.
And it took about a month to sort out what was going on, but I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. I immediately bought your book and went on the Thyroid Reset diet, and also started taking methimazole and beta blockers. I got better very, very quickly. And saw excellent results, and my methimazole has been reduced consistently over, the last 9 months or so. I just got blood results, and I had no thyroid antibodies at all. My doctor seemed surprised by that. So I have two questions. The first is, does that seem surprising to you that there would be that much improvement over the course of 9 months? I've always thought that the vaccine might have been something that triggered the Graves' disease. So my second question is, have you heard about this? Do you have an opinion about that? I sort of thought that it was interesting that as the efficacy of the vaccine wore off, that I also saw such a radical improvement. So just wanted your thoughts on both those things.
Sure. So glad you're doing great. Yeah. So Graves' disease, in terms of things that trigger that, we know that acute stressful episodes we know that it can come on from iodine exposure. We know that smokers have higher risks, but a lot of folks get it and they don't have those obvious factors. As far as vaccines across the board, including COVID vaccines, we know that severe immunologic stressors may make it come on if it was latent or could have come on anyway. There has been data looking at the onset of autoimmune thyroid disease and autoimmune disease in general after COVID infection and after COVID vaccine. And we have just definitive evidence that COVID infection causes people to get autoimmune disease they never had before. We also know that it can worsen existing autoimmune disease. We also know that it can cause secondary autoimmune disease to form. So those are all pretty well documented. Now, in terms of populations, right now we've got about, I just read these stats, we've got somewhere around 4 billion people that have had a dose of COVID vaccine. Now, in past years, people got Graves' disease, right? So if you took a group of 4 billion people, some of them got Graves' disease.
Right.
So the question is not, did somebody somewhere get Graves' disease after they got a COVID shot? For sure. There's thousands of cases of that. But the question is, has that been more prevalent than it would have been in the same population anyway? And so far, the answer to that is no. That a lot of folks have had that happen, but the best we can see, those rates are about the same. They're not different. So yeah. And in terms of your progression and your improvement, it's wonderful. I'm happy for it. Given what you've done, it's not too unusual.
Okay.
It's exceptional, great. And it's great, but you did good stuff for it, and you had a positive result from that. And with good treatment and with stabilizing thyroid levels, and with taking away extra iodine, there's about a 95% chance of remission over an 18-month period. So you're square in those numbers. Now, as far as antibodies being negative, so antibodies, there's the thyroglobulin and thyroid peroxidase, but there's also thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin. That's the main one we associate with Graves. So when your doctor said that's the one he says is negative.
Showing. Okay. Yeah.
So now that was positive before, but now it's negative, you're saying?
Yeah, it was about 370 when I was first diagnosed. And then as I've been tested through the last 9 months, it's steadily been coming down. And then this last, she said it was basically undetectable.
Totally par for the course and totally wonderful.
Great. So that's in terms of the disease in its current state, would you suggest continuing with the thyroid reset? And sort of, is there a time to wean off of that and sort of go back to normal eating?
I would stick with the green light for the current time frame. And if you're off methimazole and stable for some time, I would add in the yellow light foods as optional things. If there's anything you really miss, if there's nothing that you've been just like dying without, no big deal. But if something you really missed that way, you could phase those back in at that time. The hyper support would be smart as well, just to cut the risk of there being other complications, cut the risk of recurrence. Your antibodies being low does mean you're less likely to have recurrence. It also means you got a lower risk of Graves' eye disease. So this is a weird thing, but there are those to where they treat their Graves solely with medication and they can manage the hyperthyroidism, but not always manage the autoimmune component. And in those cases, they can feel fine and be stable, but just get whacked by Graves' eye disease. And that can be devastating. But what you've done, your risks are quite low for that. They're much lower than average. So yeah, I would stick with it, stick with the hyperthyroid support. What you may well find is that you'll likely be needing less and less methimazole. And how that'll manifest is that a dose that was good to keep you stable will start pushing you to be hypo. And that's a problem in the short term, but it's a good problem overall. It means that you need less to slow your thyroid down than you did before. So just watch regularly enough, be aware of some of those hypo symptoms. Did the doctor talk to you about sore throat and cold-like symptoms?
Yes.
Okay, good. There's a low risk of a really bad thing called agranulocytosis from methimazole.
Yes.
And that's great that he or she educated you. You'd want to get a blood count done at any of those weird symptoms. It's honestly not common, but it's catastrophic if it were to happen. So that's one perk about needing less medication, is that's one thing you can not worry about after that point.
And how long do you recommend the weaning off process taking, or does it just depend on the individual?
Depends on the individual. And as long as you're not hyper, and if you're gradually getting a little more hypo, then it's a matter of just the doctor withdrawing and monitoring, making sure that you're staying stable. But most can do well with that, especially the way you've responded and especially just all the things you've done. So kudos and wonderful. Great. And onward and upward.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care. Okay, let's get Maritza here. Maritza's got a question for us too. Maritza, let's hear what you've got for us this evening.
Oh, hello, Dr. C.
Hi, Maritza. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
So my question is, how high should the TPO be to be a risk for heart disease?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Maritza. So the slide that I had up pretty quickly, it showed people broken down into quintiles, meaning like 20% groups of how high their TPO was. And what they showed was there was a rather linear increase that spiked at the high end. So the short answer is the higher the worse, but there wasn't, besides the lowest levels, so for TPO, somewhere below 50 IUs per mil, the further it was above that, the more there was relative risk. And the risk was mostly linear. So that's a very good question. There are times to where the risk is like nothing, then it's a lot. But in this case, it was mostly linear with those different categories of elevation.
Oh, I see. Thank you. I also have another question. I'm doing the adrenal reset, and I have problem with the ashwagandha. Every time I take that, I cannot sleep. Have you have experience with that?
Not common, but certainly possible. In those cases, leave it to the side. The adrenal reset diet talks a lot about each chapter for the different levels gives you a lot of strategies. Honestly, the herbs are not the most critical of those strategies. So if that's not important, it's not a helpful part for you, focus more upon the diet, the light exposure, the lifestyle steps. They're really as powerful or more so. You'll still do fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's get several more here. We got a good roll going. Connie, let's hear what you have. Ask to unmute and go for it.
Hello.
Connie, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
I have two questions. I got from your company the blood spot thyroid test, and I thought it was like all the tests that you require. So I did it and I sent it and I made an appointment at your clinic. But now they want to see like a complete blood panel and a bunch of tests. And my thing is, the last 2 times that I had blood work, it was afterwards, my body was like really weird. I was having headache, like neck pain, a pain everywhere, like really tired, like fatigue. And this doctor told me that it was like the immune system is in the blood and it was like in shock or something. So I've been concerned about getting the regular blood work. And I wonder if you have blood spot test for the rest of the hormones, or I really have to do the regular blood work.
Well, so a couple of thoughts. Yeah, there's, blood tests can be not fun. Some folks can have problems with needles or whatnot. So this totally happens. In terms of the data from that, it's good data on your thyroid function. That's certainly enough to answer a lot of questions and to get things going. If it is possible, it is nice to know more depth about your chemistry. The blood spot tests, they don't yet offer all the data as far as like liver, kidney function, detailed anemia panels, things like that. So it is limited. So you do have the option of working with a doctor with what we know so far. We can totally make that happen. If you've got tests from the past, we could certainly look at those as well and make sense of that. But yeah, there's only so much they can do on blood spot tests, unfortunately.
Okay, I understand. And the other question is, if the last time, like 6-8 months ago that I had blood work, my calcium in the blood was on the high side.
Okay.
So
do you remember a number, do you?
Like 10.
Okay.
And now I feel like I need it for my knees, but I'm afraid to take it because I usually have like palpitations and I'm taking out levothyroxine. And I cut the dose because I was having so many symptoms like blood sugar issues, like stomach loose and palpitations, feeling really bad in the morning. So my thing is now I forgot.
What's with the calcium?
The calcium. I don't know if I should take it or it's going to increase my palpitations like 500 milligrams. Would that be really bad?
Well, so a couple thoughts. Your thyroid function could certainly be a factor for palpitations. If your dose wasn't right, it wasn't working well for you, it's a great thing to sort out. Calcium being high in the blood, it's not caused by taking calcium, but it can be worsened. So when that's high, there's two things that cause that. The most common by far is one of the glands that's next to your thyroid is parathyroids. They're making too much hormone. They're pulling in too much calcium. That's the most common cause by far. In those cases, more calcium can worsen that, but the calcium alone wouldn't cause that. So if there was a chance of it, I wouldn't bother with extra calcium until that was sorted out. And in terms of how that shows up on blood tests, if your scores are consistently above 9.8, that is suspicious. That could be a culprit going on behind the scenes. That by itself can also cause palpitations or many other symptoms. So yeah, good thing to square away, good thing to get diagnosed. Ideally, whenever you next did blood chemistries, they could also look at your calcium in a more detailed way and screen your parathyroid hormones. But there's that is a blood test. That's the only way to really see that. But that could be a factor for you. That'd be an important thing to catch.
Okay, I will do it then. Thank you.
I'm happy to put in a word for you to the office and say, hey, I want you guys to talk to Connie and use the test she's got so far. Would that be useful for you, or?
Well, yes, but it's going to be only TSH. So I'd rather do the blood work and go through to find out everything else. Yeah. But thank you.
Okay. All right. Have a good evening, Connie.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Kathleen, let's get several more. Where are we at on time? I'll get a couple more. I'm not going to get all of them tonight. I'm sorry. So one request though, if you're if you've not asked your question and you put yours up more recently, please do type it in the chat. I do look at these in chat. Josh can answer some off the cuff or share some resources that might help. I'll see them. And if I can't answer them tonight, I'll talk with them on social media. I'll make more content for them. But I also do office hours live most Mondays. I will be away the next 2 Mondays. I'm finishing up a manuscript, but you can always ask on those. And I'll be back doing these. I will do these the next couple of weeks still. But yeah, Kathleen, you are up next. Let's hear what you have for us tonight.
Hi, Dr. C.
Hey, Kathleen.
Good to talk to you.
You too.
My question isn't on thyroid. It's more on the metabolism side.
Okay.
I have a question about probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
Do your formulations have probiotics?
So we've got 2 whole different lines. The brand new line, I've not made a novel probiotic in that line. I didn't have a cause to, but our current Dr. Christensen store, we do have probiotics. Yep.
Okay, you do have probiotics.
Yeah.
I understand that it's good to have a variety of the probiotics. I'm currently on the Spore Biotics by Dr. Christian, and I've had good results with that. So if I go with your the thyroid bundles and all of those, should I?
Those do not include probiotics.
Okay, so
they would be compatible with other probiotics.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's it.
He's got a lovely name.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
really hard to pronounce. Yeah.
But here's a quick note. I'm going to drop this in the chat if you can see this. Here's a super detailed article I wrote about probiotics. It's all about who should think about taking them, what type might you want to take, when would you take them, and what are the various forms that are best documented. So yeah, check that. I don't say everyone needs to take them. Some can definitely benefit from them, but there's different forms that are out, and this can help guide you through some of that.
Okay, and how do I get that off of chat?
If you can copy that, if you click on that in your chat, it'll probably open up that article in your browser.
Okay, thank you.
If nothing else, you could copy that and paste that in your browser window, and that would open it up there.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. All right, Sherry, you are next up on the list. Let's hear what you got for us this evening.
Hi, Dr. C.
Hey, Sherry.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just great.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing this.
So I said Sherry, and Siri started talking to me here on the side.
Oh.
No, not you. There we go.
Okay. I started the Thyroid Reset diet in October of 2020. Okay. And I started out with really, really high TPO antibodies, about 4,545.9. It was the highest in December of 2015. And now they're down to 1,389.4.
Okay.
As of November of 2021.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm really pleased. I just thank you so much for your research. Yet I still realize my antibodies are high, and I wonder, I hadn't known about the atherosclerosis. And so I'm concerned about that. I had heard that, thyroid disease could cause heart disease, but I didn't know what.
There's a lot more data talking about how, way too much thyroid hormone or way too little thyroid hormone can cause heart disease. That's more commonly talked about, but this is another way in which they can relate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how can I find out if I have heart disease? I mean, I don't know. Or how do I know that I realize that being on this diet and taking the supplements will help, but
as far as screening, something, a lot of the routine basic stuff like lipid panels and blood sugar panels and blood pressure, they tell a lot about cardiovascular risk. As far as early disease being actually present and not just risk, there's a thing called a coronary artery CT. They call those calcium scores or calcium scans in some cases. Now, there's CT scans. They're super fast. They usually take 64 pictures, and they're looking at your coronary arteries. So those are the arteries that actually give blood to the heart muscle. So that's like often the first place for heart disease to show up. It's also the worst place for heart disease to show up. And they can actually see it if it's there. Now, it's pretty cool because these tests in most regions, there are things that you don't need a prescription for, and they're usually not expensive. They're often like $100 or less.
Oh, okay.
So medical imaging centers, you would look for medical imaging centers in your area and see if any offer coronary artery CT scans. Now, if worst case scenario, you can always ask a doctor to order or recommend that for you. They're not going to be covered by insurance, but they're not expensive. And if your pipes are clear, the likelihood of there being plaque buildup in the coming decade or so is extremely small. But there are some people to where they don't have a lot of obvious risks, but they've got a lot of plaque that's there. And it's like, okay, great, we know this, let's do something about it. So that's a really good way to know.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's get a couple more here still. So next up we have, let me take a peek again. So that would be Kathleen, who's next in our queue. So Kathleen, I see you now. I asked to unmute and go for it.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can. How you doing?
Good. Pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
I'll go through this really quick. So my free T3, these labs were done a while ago, but what drove me to get them was hair loss, feelings of unwell. And so like I have a T3 of 5, T4 of 12.4, my TSH 2.38, thyroglobulin 6.6. So I think that's low, but still in the range. Mm-hmm. And then thyroid paradox antibodies 160.2. So that's one that's coming back high, and the thyroglobulin 57.5. So that's coming back high. And so with that being said, I'm not on any meds or anything. And basically the doctors say when that's nothing to worry about at this stage. However, I have had a positive ANA and ENA. And recently just was diagnosed with like I have a sensory polyneuropathy. So they're saying I have like an undifferentiated connective tissue disorder, but the markers, I have that SSB marker was raised and the immunoglobulin A was raised, but nothing that points them in any direction. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, is this still a thyroid, I mean, maybe not a thyroid issue, but should I still deal with the thyroid component of this problem or with these symptoms that I'm having?
You should. Yeah, I would definitely focus on that part of it as being relevant. I'm going to share something with you. Let's see. I'm looking for one of my articles I wrote here. Autoimmune tests. Here we go. How accurate is autoimmune screening? The tests that you mentioned are ones that if you took any single human and did a large panel of autoimmune tests, everyone has some things that come back positive. So those tests are only meaningful in the context of a whole lot of other findings together. So Please don't be scared about those findings. It's quite normal and quite average. Here's a very detailed post in which I cited all the numbers and talked about why I can say that off the cuff. You know, it's true.
I'm just going to take a picture of that. Okay.
yeah. Check that one out. Okay. But I would certainly look at the thyroid function. But then also, you talked about hair loss. Think through your iron status. I think I shared that link a bit earlier. Yeah. Think through your protein status. I've got a very detailed one on hair loss by itself too. I talked about the different types of that, the main causes of that. So yeah, think about that and the big factors.
Okay.
And what happens too is that you also mentioned some neurologic type symptoms. Mm-hmm. And I was going to say the cool thing, there's no cool thing about hair loss, but if there's anything useful, it's that it's a sign that there's something else off. Right. And a lot of the core issues that can cause that can cause a variety of other symptoms. So if you end up thinking it through and looking at the main things that could drive that, talk to your doctor about that, whatever you find is probably going to be affecting more than just your hair. So that's the useful part about investigating it.
Right. Well, I've bought this book now, so I'm going to be reading this book. And also,
so jump on that.
I think I was introduced to her by you, Dr. Terry Walls.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was reading that because her book is based on not just MS research, but autoimmune diet and things. So I've been following that and trying to clean up the diet a bit. So now that I've bought your book, I thought I could combine it with your book. Where I see the big differences are the iodine.
Sure.
Because in that book, there's promoted a lot, seafood and our seaweed eating and that kind of thing. And
so Terry's a friend. She's a brilliant clinician. Her work has been evidenced to help benefit symptoms of those with MS. What you're describing, it wouldn't be necessary. It would have to be more restrictive for you. And if you put on 2 different pieces of mesh, like no sand falls through. So if you have 2 lists of avoid this, there's like no foods that are left.
Yeah, I know. I'm finding it.
So I love her. I wouldn't focus on that side right now. If you were saying MS is your big concern, I'd say be a Walls warrior all the way. But I'd say no, focus on this one thing.
So versus not just general autoimmune disorders.
Correct.
Okay, so focus on the thyroid first. Possibly.
Yep. I don't want you kicking all the food to the curb. I want you to still have food in your diet.
Yeah, I know. It's getting pretty lean. Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You bet. Take care of yourself.
Okay. Bye.
Let's grab a couple more here still. So Nancy, you are next up. Let's see what you have for us this evening.
I have 2 questions.
All right.
I was wondering if it's all right to use chickpea protein powder.
Sure.
Okay. And I hate stevia in anything. Okay. It leaves such an aftertaste for me that I can taste 2 hours later. And I was just wondering if you will ever come out with a daily reset shake that doesn't have stevia in it.
Perhaps somewhere along the way. The tough thing about the shakes, I was talking the numbers about this with my team, is that we've got to make up like 5,000 at a time.
Oh, wow.
And that means like a 7-figure investment to make a new batch. So that's the tough part. And if like 3% of people want that, and I'm making like, 5,000, if I put $1 million in 5,000 bottles of something, that they're not going to sell before they go bad. So that's just the realities of why I don't have like 20 different kinds of shakes. I apologize about that. We do have a plain protein powder on the store. And if not, I'll double check. And I know we have, but that's a great starting place then.
I haven't seen that.
I'll double check on that. If we don't have that, I'm sure we get that back. And that's on the drchristiansen.com store.
Okay. I can look for that. And I am loving the Thyroid Daily vitamin supplement.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. That is so much better than the B complex I was on.
A lot of folks have been saying that. More people are aware of being sensitive to high dose B vitamins. I have that myself. Yeah. So thank you for that feedback.
Okay. That was all.
Bye-bye. A couple more here. I was not exactly on order. Okay. So Michelle, you are up next. Go for it, Michelle. What have you got?
Hi, Dr. C.
Hey, Michelle.
I have a couple of quick ones.
Sure.
I've heard you say previously that any amount of antibodies is not good because they're not supposed to be there.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering, in terms of what are the lowest levels of antibodies that you would recommend someone be taking antibody support for, the supplement? So if someone has a level that's within range, it's not considered abnormal, how low would that number be that would make you say, I recommend you take the supplement? 5, 100? I don't know where the bottom is.
So there's certainly a lot of context to this, and this is a matter of if there are unresolved symptoms they could relate to, if there are the risk factors they could be affecting. So as far as someone, let's say that fertility was not a concern, let's say that there was like almost no cardiovascular risk and no real family history, and let's say that someone had just perfect thyroid function. In those cases, the number would be 100, because the further you are above that, the more we start seeing elevated risk for thyroid decline. But short of that, there seems to be no clear correlation. Now, if someone has substantial cardiovascular risk, that could make a small number more relevant. If someone's really struggling with fertility to get it right, that could also make a small number more relevant. So yeah, it does take context for that. But otherwise, 100 to be just a general cutoff. But if lower numbers are more relevant, the more of those factors come into play.
Okay, I understand. And I was just curious if you have any idea when your omega supplement might be coming in for those of us who are waiting? Because I'm a little bit freaking out because I'm still taking the omega that I had been on from my doctor. And now that I have it in my mind that there's the iodine risk, I don't feel so good about it while I'm taking it. So I'm a bit over anxious for your supplement to come in. And I wondered if you had an update.
I'm with you. We actually just spoke to the manufacturer and we're looking at, we thought it was going to be this last week. It should be within a week. It should be pretty quick. So there's no talk about like months and months and like stuck on a boat from China because it's not coming from China or things like that. So pretty quick.
Okay. Well, that's good news. I'm happy I asked. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you so much.
You're sure welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Maggie, you are next up. Let's hear what you got this evening.
Okay. My question I typed out, so I'll try to make it real quick.
Oh, you're all good.
I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's 5 years ago. My TSH was 73, above 73. The Thyroglobulin was over 2,500s. With the diet, supplement, and lifestyle changes and no medication, I was able to get my TSH down to 11.15, and my antibodies went down a little bit. Last December, my TSH was at 12.2, and in April, my antibodies were at 26.72. I have the reset, thyroid reset diet, and I've been trying to avoid the yellow and red foods, but I haven't done the shakes at all. My question is it realistic at this point to get my TSH and my antibodies within range by continuing just diet, supplements, and lifestyle change with the hope of going into remission? Or should I just forget all this and take medication?
So your TSH is up. Have your free hormones dropped off or have they been in range?
I think they've been in range.
Okay. So this is what we would call subclinical hypothyroidism, to be really precise. So the question then is, are there strong symptoms you feel are associated with this? Or generally, do you have well-being?
I generally have well-being. Even when I was diagnosed, that's not what I was going into the doctors for. And they just told me that. And I said, what's that?
Yeah. So this is something that often just shocks people and it really shocks doctors, but subclinical hypothyroidism, it can be associated with symptoms. It may be associated with some medical risks, but it doesn't help people to go on medications for it. That data is like overwhelmingly clear. If you were put on medication, yes, you could lower your TSH. And yes, you would think, because if your TSH was naturally lower, there would be lower risks in various ways. But lowering your TSH with medication is not the same thing as having a lower TSH. So it doesn't improve your risks. It doesn't improve your chance of your thyroid getting worse, and it doesn't make you feel better. So it's really not a critical thing. It's really not you can continue as you have been. It is safe to do so, and you may see further improvement.
Okay, even after all this time, because my doctor, the endocrinologist, as well as my other doctor, is trying to. You need to go on medication. And I really don't want to. And since I got some success at the beginning and getting the number down, I keep trying, but I feel I'm really like losing hope that I'll get the number down. And I don't know if I should just continue or just start eating, stuff my face with pizza. I'm really.
So is this the article I'm thinking about? Let's see. No, I'm trying to find, there's one I wrote recently about this topic. And, oh, shoot. You know what? I'm not finding it just yet. I will look for this further. But ask them what would it help to go on medication? Ask them if it would make you feel better, if it would lower your risk of your thyroid getting worse, or if it would cut your disease risks. The answer to all those, it's already been answered. It's no to all those things. It's been looked at exhaustively. And if the answer was yes, it'd be a whole different discussion to be having. But it's just no. So what you could think about, though, you might be one to where iodine testing could be worthwhile. You could think about a urinary iodine to creatinine ratio test. If you just Google me and iodine testing, you'll stumble across that option and what it means and what the levels are. If your levels are still high, that means either somewhere along the way you were exposed to a whopping amount and it just hasn't cleared yet, or it could mean there's still some sneaking in your body from somewhere. So, and if that's the case, that's an easy opportunity. If your iodine levels are below 100 micrograms per gram of creatinine, you're doing what you can, you want to stay there. But if they're way above that, either it just takes more time because there was so much, or there's a leak somewhere. There's some getting in. So that could be a worthwhile step for you.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good question. Yeah, really important topic. There's scores of people that are put on thyroid medication for that reason. They've got subclinical disease, and somebody well-intentioned thinks that this is going to improve their health or their well-being. And the data is overwhelming that it just does not. But this is by far the majority of prescribed thyroid medication are for reasons just like that. And it's not to say that they couldn't be affected by this condition or at risk for it, but the medications just don't help. So, okay, that's my rant. Sophia, let's hear what you've got. Let's get a couple more here. Why don't you go for it?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. You're doing great.
Thank you, Dr. C, for taking my call. And
I just lost your video, though. You were on video, now it's gone. But
okay.
Oh, there you go. Now you're back up again. Okay.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Okay. So my number, I was the one, like you said, I was diagnosed with subclinical hypothyroidism about 2 years ago. And the doctor put me on
levothyroxine.
Yes, that one for 25 milligrams. And I have been taking it for about a year and a half until I listened to a breast cancer expert doctor. She said synthetic hormone, including thyroid hormone, can double the risk of breast cancer.
Oh my goodness.
So
that's completely untrue.
Oh, really?
That's completely untrue.
So half a year ago, after I heard that, I just stopped my I stopped my medication. And in November, when I did the thyroid blood test, and here is my number. That's about half years after I stopped the medication. My TSH is 2.8, and my free T4 is 1.06, and my free T3 is 2.7, and the TPO antibody, it says less than 8. So my question is it okay that I continue to not taking the levo?
So I can't prescribe over the internet here. Those are not blood levels that would warrant someone starting thyroid medication. Those are basically normal blood levels, maybe a hint outside of optimal, but essentially normal. You can do lifestyle steps like we've talked about and see good improvements at levels like that. So, and I'm sorry, who was it that said about the breast cancer thing? I didn't catch the name.
I forgot. I think she has a long name. She has a long name, and she also
Magdalena by any chance? She's got a longer last name. Okay,
a longer last name. And she promote a breast. She even have a device help, like a breast soft like silicone kind of device help women to
help with breast exam.
Yes, to help detect it.
Okay.
I forgot her name.
Veronica, Victoria.
Is that?
I think I know who. I know so many of these people.
Maybe I don't remember it.
So some quick feedback. Yeah. I know who that is. Okay. So some quick feed. The device is called Your Breast Friend. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. Clever name. Yep. So some quick feedback. So yes, that would have been subclinical disease that you had. And Synthroid, it's a microgram dose. That would have been a tiny fraction of what your body would have needed. Now, we categorize it as synthetic in terms of convenience, but it's not synthetic in the sense that it's the same your body makes. So it's not a foreign thing. And there's no data whatsoever that if you don't need it, you shouldn't take it, right? So I'm not saying that. But there's no data whatsoever that taking it is a factor for breast cancer risk. So yeah, please just take that out of your head.
So would you recommend me to, because I'm interested in buying your daily bundle, and would you also
the bundle would be a great fit. You don't need the antibody support. Your antibodies are negligible. They're not even there. The bundle would be a nice thing, but yeah, your scores otherwise are quite normal.
Okay, so yeah, so you answered my question. My question was, do I need the antibody support?
No.
And because I'm a Chinese, in our traditional diet, we eat a lot of seafood. Like in my pantry right now, I have 6 package of different kind of seaweed. So I heard your education that we need to not to have iodine intake. So probably I should just not eating any of those, right? They have like a nori.
You could benefit so much by doing that. I know they're popular foods and they're tasty things, but yeah, grab the Thyroid Reset diet and look at those guidelines, and I think you'll do fine.
Okay, so maybe I'll give those seaweed to my husband to eat, and I will not eat them.
All right. Have a good night, Sophia. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much, doctor.
So I got confused about the video because there was 2 Sophias up at once. I see you. All right. Let's do another Sophia here. We'll get a couple more still. All right. Go for it, Sophia.
Thank you so much. I hope that it was me the first time. I'm like, no, it's here. Okay. Thank you very much for answering my questions here. So you gave an example early on about a lady who had very high TPO levels, antibodies, very low TG antibodies, and she was put on natural desiccated thyroid, and they went down fantastic. She had Hashimoto's, right? Yep. I did not see any TSH level, and the question is, like, I assume that you would do that only if the TSH level is raised above 2.
Yeah. So in that case, I wasn't initiating therapy for her. She came to me already on medication.
Okay. Is there any circumstance you put for somebody who has, for instance, TPO antibodies or TG or both of them about 500 or so or more, if the TSH levels are pretty normal, 1.5, let's say 1.9, whatever, free T4, free T3, really fantastic, maybe in the middle.
Sure.
Does it make any sense to put them on that?
Nope, I would not initiate therapy in those cases. Yeah, big difference in initiating therapy and adjusting therapy. But you're exactly right. That would not be a case in which I would suggest someone to initiate therapy.
So you would wait. You would do stuff to lower the antibodies that you talked about, obviously. And if that doesn't work, eventually the TSH would go high. If something else happens, and then maybe do the desiccated thyroid.
So people that have a thyroid, I have yet to see cases. Again, it's 97% or more from clinical trials. And that's just doing very basic recommendations. That's not giving thorough iodine recommendations. And that's not doing these other steps as well. So yeah, people can do quite well in that case if they still have some thyroid tissue remaining.
And by the way, you're talking about having COVID. I had COVID over the Christmas or after Christmas. I had my thyroid, my Hashimoto's, very stable, no problems, mostly no symptoms for about 7 years. And now my symptoms are back. Okay. So I haven't tested yet, but I can feel inflammation actually. And there is, I can feel I said something, but I didn't catch it there, with the throat kind of like almost like irritated, like inside the throat. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I think it's probably related to Hashimoto's.
For sure, update your thyroid labs and adjust that as need be. But yeah, that's a tough thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna get a couple more. Hey, my friend Bethany is here this evening. Bethany, how you doing?
Hi, Dr. C. Good to talk.
Hey, you too. How you been?
I've been doing well. Yeah. So I had a doctor's appointment with Dr. Espinal. And I know in the past we have really recommended doing iron IVs. And she kind of recommended the easy iron, but she was a little bit hesitant this time. So my ferritin levels are still going down. So I'm at 10 now. So it's just going down. But I have been absorbing my thyroid medication. We've been lowering that each time, so that's great. And I can't recommend Foothill anymore. Like, I am so happy with that medication.
They've been good for you. Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
But my question about the Easy Iron is it something I should take? Her concern was my hemocreatin and my hemoglobin are high, and they've been consistently high since 2017. So she's like, I'm really confused that your iron ferritin is always low, but your hemocreatin and your hemoglobin are always high.
So that can be a thalassemia. That's a very specific scenario.
Okay.
Bethany, you're with Dr. I've met you before. Let me take a peek at your actual data and talk with Dr. Espinal and give you a specific reply about that. I would guess that's a thalassemia, but I'll give a more specific answer. I'm going to have a quick action step for that.
Okay. So I have...
And in which case the answer would be yes, it can still help to add more iron, but I'll confirm that.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll want to be more specific with her because she's like, I have recommended the iron IVs, but now I'm not sure you should come. So
sure. Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll sort that out.
Is that safe for me to take the Easy Iron once a day?
It is. There's no drawbacks to that. But if it's a matter of, I'll confirm about amounts that would be appropriate for you and durations, and if it were a matter of a real lack.
Yeah. And I'm definitely having, all the symptoms of, low iron. I have muscle fatigue, joint pain is like one of my worst things. And yeah, so.
Okay. You're doing good with the Easy Iron so far?
So far, so good. Yeah.
Okay. There is the option, and I'll give you more specific feedback. There is the option of higher doses for those to where it's indicated by their scores. But yeah, 1 a day is a good starting amount, but we'll figure that out.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Oh,
all right. Let's get one more here tonight. Anybody on video? Here's someone right here. There's Anne. Let's get Anne for our last one tonight. I'll ask to unmute and go for it.
Hear me?
I can hear you, Anne. How you doing?
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, I've been associated with your practice for several years. I'm watching today for my daughter, and she's 21. She's had Hashimoto's since she was 10, and she's on 1 grain and irregular periods, trying to get those regulated. They're finally starting to get better, but the odd thing is, last 6 months, her TPOs are going from like 300 now over 1,000.
Okay.
And I just cannot figure out what is. I just want to ask, can you think of anything that is just an obvious hidden thing? I'm thinking iodine, that those are going up so quickly. And then the other thought is she went on NP. And is there any correlation or possibility that the NP could trigger that? She did well on WP. Should we maybe think about doing the compounded, we're in town, so we could go to this Foothills and maybe try and switching that? I
always think about, there's not harm to changing, but I just don't know if it's necessary or not. So if the scores for thyroid scores were not staying stable, that'd be a good reason to change. If they were stable, but it was just the antibodies coming up, that wouldn't be a matter of the medication, however. In those cases, you're right. Think a lot about iodine being the biggest culprit and some of the hidden sources of that, or the more apparent ones. I don't know how deep she's gotten in that just yet.
What was the last thing you said?
I would think about iodine. If her levels were not stable, then I'd blame the medication. But if her levels are stable besides the antibodies, it's not the medication.
Okay, so the Thyroid Reset diet book will have the levels recommended. And what about, real quick, a water softener? Would that have iodine in it?
No. So they'll often have different types of compounds, like of calcium compounds or sodium compounds, but they're not using iodized salt with those.
Okay.
Yeah, fair question.
Okay, and she's going to try the Inositol and selenium supplement.
The Antibody Support, yeah. Yep.
So, okay. I think that's it.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let me get one more. What the heck here? Let's one more. So who else is right close by? ROCIO, Roccio? Help me with pronunciation. I'm asked to unmute here. I hit asked to unmute. There we go.
Hi.
Hi
Can
there.
you hear me?
I can. How do you pronounce the name?
My name is Rocio. R-O-C-I-O.
Oh, that's
yes.
beautiful. That's much prettier than how I said it.
No problem. Thank you very much for taking the call. Quick question. I am 57 years old, being very healthy so far. For the last 20 years, I haven't taken any medications. And last September, I started to feel very, very, very tired. I am a runner. Didn't have energy to run. So my doctor suggested some lab tests. And it came back with a very mild hypothyroidism.
Okay.
My question is, for the last 7 years, I fast every week. I do a water fast for 40 hours. So my question is, am I doing the right thing right now with this thyroid issue?
Well, you've done the fasting for some time, you said, huh? And
yeah,
the thyroid issue is newer.
Years.
Yeah, I don't think that's caused it. There has been data showing that those that already have thyroid disease, the biggest studies we have come from Ramadan, actually. And they've tracked those who are fasting in the daytime hours and then eating at night. And they've shown that in those cases, those who already have thyroid disease, it does worsen a little bit when they're doing fasting like that. I don't think that's actually caused thyroid disease for you. If it just came
I don't
like
either.
No.
I just don't want to make things worse. So that was my question.
Yeah,
to put more stress on the body.
If it's an ongoing practice, that's been an important thing for you. I wouldn't think it's too big of a thing. It can change more so how your body activates thyroid hormone. It can lower T3 output, but not so much in an ongoing way. So I would think about the other causes we've talked about. Look at the reset diet, especially think about the basic micronutrients and see how you do. The fasting is probably a habit that's important for other reasons. And if someone were saying, "Hey, look, I want to fast to lose weight and my thyroid's off," well, that's probably not going to help you. But if it's just been part of your lifestyle or habits for other reasons, for other ways for a long time, I don't think it's really that important in terms of your thyroid right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, good to see you guys this evening. I got a bunch of hands up still and it breaks my heart, but I promised that I'd go play some games with my family here before I go on the retreat to finish up the manuscript here in a few more days. So I'm going to do that. But yeah, please put things in chat if you've not just yet. I will keep an eye on those and watch for that. But good to see you guys. It was a really fun group and a good evening tonight. And I will see you all next week. And our topic next week, let me see what I've got on the calendar. Next week, we're talking about, about the overall micronutrients. Yep, the foundational support. Cool. Okay. I will see you guys then. And that will be a good thing. In the meantime, take great care of yourselves. Bye-bye.